Stay that way. We'll see the temperature drop down near the freezing mark tonight. Tomorrow, partly sunny with a high around 40.
Phil, presenting holiday traditions throughout December, like Handel's Messiah and Holiday Brass, plus Marvel Studios' Black Panther in concert, an event combining film and orchestra. Tickets at nyphil.org/holidays.
WNYC, independent journalism in the public interest. 93.9 FM and AM 820. NPR News and the New York Conversation.
Marketplace is supported by Charles Schwab. Schwab believes every investor deserves to work with a firm they can count on, with financial consultants ready to serve clients and 24/7 live help.
In which, once again, economic headlines give way to economic stories. From American Public Media, this is Marketplace.
Marketplace is supported by Palo Alto Networks. Palo Alto Networks delivers what's next in cybersecurity innovation to protect today's digital way of life. Learn more at paloaltonetworks.com. And by Cornerstone, whose AI-powered talent experience platform helps organizations unite tech, data, and content to unlock the potential of their future-ready workforce. Learn more at csod.com.
In Los Angeles, I'm Kai Rizdal. It is Thursday today, December the 7th. Good as always to have you along, everybody. It is a fact that every week all across this country, American workers file for unemployment benefits for the first time. Last week, it was precisely 220,000 people who lost their jobs, basically steady. And I'll note here that we'll get the big picture November jobs report tomorrow. But the point is that every one of those people filing is a story of changing business demand or costs that are too high or something. And in this still unpredictable post-pandemic economy, that something can be hard to understand. Marketplace's Mitchell Hartman gets us going with one small business, an electronic music store in Seattle, that is on that roller coaster right now, headed down.
Patchworks is a music store specializing in synthesizers and electronic instruments that make noises like this. Tom Butcher created that electronic dance track, and he's co-owner of Patchworks. Early in the pandemic, the store was shuttered and half the staff laid off. But when they reopened, business went through the roof, as Butcher told me heading into the holidays in 2020.
Things have been going pretty well for us. This summer, we saw record sales. A lot of people are just staying home. They're looking at ways to, bring themselves joy at home, maybe learn a new instrument.
That lasted for a year or two. But when I spoke to him earlier this week, different tune.
We've been seeing demand erode maybe 18 months.
Butcher has a good idea why.
The relief money is gone and, people are back at work and maybe they've already spent money on their hobbies, their music equipment.
It's not just his business experiencing this. Retail sales at sporting goods, hobby, music, and bookstores have stalled out. And Butcher and his partner have been cutting back.
We had to reduce our hours.
They went from being open 7 to just 4 days a week. They cut the online marketing budget and...
Yeah, unfortunately, we had to do staff layoffs. We did a round last year and then a smaller round a couple of months ago. This time around, we made some painful cuts. People really didn't want to let go. We had to let go.
The company peaked at 20 employees. Now there are 6. Butcher may sound downbeat compared to the boom times when I interviewed him early in the pandemic, but he says,
if we can be smart and survive through this period, we'll be so much better positioned on the other side. But now it's a waiting game. When will the customers come back and what will they want to buy?
They're ready to wait it out. Butcher says he and his business partner have both now taken full-time tech jobs in Seattle so they don't have to pull money out of the business to pay themselves. I'm Mitchell Hartman for Marketplace.
On Wall Street today, the roller coaster that place was mostly to the upside. Tech, as it happens, did well. We'll have the details when we do the numbers. On the very, very long list of agenda items at the UN Climate Conference that's going on in Dubai right now is drought. In a report this year, the UN warned that the increasing frequency and severity of drought everywhere is an unprecedented emergency on a planetary scale. That's a quote. More than 20 years into the mega drought that we're having out here in the American Southwest, this season of our podcast, How We Survive, is all about how we're adapting to that drier future. Marketplace's Amy Scott has been following a couple in rural Arizona who spent months without affordable running water.
The first sign that something is amiss at Lee Harris's house is the plastic bottles lined up outside the front door, dozens of them.
So, as you can see, we have a price to pay for living in paradise.
A fit blonde woman in an Arcade Fire t-shirt comes out to greet us.
You have to promise me to not think untoward of us because we've been literally camping in this house for 6 months now with no real running water.
It's June, and inside there are more bottles all over the tile floor, which Lee admits hasn't been cleaned in a while.
We do our best. We can't wash the floors or do things that normal water. You don't really think about how you use water on an everyday basis when it's just flowing from taps.
She could turn on the taps and clean water would come out, but at a price Lee can no longer afford. Because here in Rio Verde Foothills, an unincorporated community outside Scottsdale, Arizona, Lee and her husband, Frank Avril, are among hundreds of people whose homes aren't connected to a water utility and don't have wells. Instead, they rely on hauled water they used to buy from the city of Scottsdale and have delivered in big trucks to an underground tank at their house. But back in January, as part of a plan to address the ongoing drought, Scottsdale announced,
"We will no longer allow anyone who is not a Scottsdale resident or business to buy any more water from our standpipe," and they were definitive about it.
People living on hauled water would have to buy it somewhere else. The water haulers now had to drive hours away to fill up. And for Lee and Frank, the price jumped from about $130 every 6 weeks or so for a full tank to more than $500. Lee and Frank are both semi-retired. She's 63 and works at an assisted living facility. Frank, who's 70, at a grocery store.
Spending $500 to get one tank of water delivered is just outside of our budget.
To get by, they've been living on water borrowed from work or friends' houses, eating packaged soups and rice, things that don't use water.
We use whatever you can stick in a microwave and not add anything to.
And collecting rainwater to flush their toilets. That's what we saw stored in all those bottles outside.
It takes about 2 gallons to flush a toilet, and we go ahead and put it into the tank behind the toilet. So here you go. Anything to stay in our house, right? You've got to do what you got to do.
I mean, some people might hear this and say, well, why don't they leave? I mean, if you were to try to sell this house, would you be able to?
No. I mean, we could probably sell it for maybe a quarter of what it's worth. But for my husband and I, this is everything we have.
Over the hot, dry summer, there wasn't much rain. In early August, I went back to see Lee and Frank. By this point, it had been 8 months, and their rainwater was running out.
We were getting pretty worried because one by one, we were emptying our tanks just to be able to flush our toilets.
But finally, a solution was in sight. The community worked out a deal to buy water from a private company and use Scottsdale's infrastructure to deliver it to Rio Verde Foothills. In late October, Lee sent me a voice memo.
The truck is just about to turn onto our property, coming down the driveway. This is massively exciting. Honey, water delivery truck's here.
More than 9 months after Scottsdale shut them off, the residents of Rio Verde foothills were finally able to access their new supply of water.
Yahoo! We got water!
It doesn't mean a complete return to normal. Lee and Frank are still paying more than twice what they used to for water, and the deal is temporary. Long-term, the community will have to help pay for a new standpipe and processing plant. Lee estimates it'll take 20 years to pay off their $18,000 share. With all these costs, she and Frank have agreed they can only afford to stay in the house as long as they're physically able to keep working. And they plan to keep collecting rainwater. They've installed a filtration system so they can drink it too. In Rio Verde foothills, Arizona, I'm Amy Scott for Marketplace.
Hear more about Rio Verde foothills and how a loophole in Arizona law lets developers keep on building on those dry lots. You can hear it on our podcast, How We Survive, platform of your choice, of course. With the return of labor calm in Hollywood, the temptation is to think all is settled. And for now, it is. But the potentially, probably disruptive role of artificial intelligence in entertainment is not going to go away. And as Marketplace's Sabri Benishore reports, the reality is that AI is already in Hollywood and is doing a whole lot of work.
The 2015 movie Heist starred Jeffrey Dean Morgan and Robert De Niro.
Give me my money back.
It's the story of a guy who robs a casino to pay for his daughter's medical treatment. Scott Mann was the director.
And it was when I saw the foreign dubs of the movie that I realized that dubbing involves changing all the dialogue. It involves a complete different type of performance, and it all doesn't sync up. So it's a non-immersive kind of mess.
Fast forward to today, Mann's helped build Flawless, a company that uses AI to make it look like an actor is speaking a foreign language. So the actor's mouth actually matches the voiceover lines.
It really learns kind of how the actors have performed and how they speak. And essentially, it's re-rendering a version that adjusts the lip synchronicity, but without touching the performance itself.
AI is also being used to make CGI faster and less expensive. Nikola Todorovic is co-CEO of Wonder Dynamics. His company's AI automatically analyzes video to create CGI graphics around or over actors, effects that normally require lots of equipment, data, time, and money to produce.
We really built this on top of kind of self-driving car and robotics technology. When you think about self-driving cars, they have to understand the world around them through a lens of a camera.
He says cutting the cost of CGI will make it more accessible to filmmakers with lower budgets.
You're going to see a lot of indie filmmakers that are making films that are big spectacles, but a bit more grounded in the storytelling.
Some AI works on movies before they are ever made.
So we're able to predict the audience's reactions and the success of a project from script stage.
Monica Landers is CEO of StoryFit. Using hundreds of models, her AI also analyzes a script in great detail.
Why doesn't this scene resonate? Is it because of the character strength? Is it because of the lack of motivation? Is it because of the pacing? So we get very granular.
One thing that all of these Hollywood AI companies have in common is they aren't designed to replace actors, directors, or writers. They're meant to be tools to help them. In New York, I'm Sabri Benishore for Marketplace.
Coming up.
Everyone likes what they do. We like our customers.
Hey, are you hiring? First, though, let's do the numbers. Dow Industrial's up 62 points today, 0.2%, 36,117. The NASDAQ gained 193 points. That's 1.4%, 14,339. The S&P 500 pocketed 36 points, about 0.8%, 45 and 85 there. Google announced the release of its most advanced AI model yet, named Project Gemini. It's the company's attempt, of course, to gain traction after ChatGPT. Shares of Google's parent Alphabet climbed 5.3% today. The Biden administration opened the door today to seizing some patents developed with the help of taxpayer funds. It's a policy called March-in rights. It lets the federal government share drug patents with other pharmaceutical companies. The White House says it's a way to force those companies to offer competitive prescription drug pricing. So, in pharmaceutical stocks, Johnson & Johnson down 0.8%. Eli Lilly slumped 0.2%. Gas prices also down, an 11-month low this week. The national average for a gallon of fuel dipped to $3.20. So says AAA. I say you're listening to Marketplace.
The Marketplace Numbers segment is supported by Odoo, simple management software for all your business needs. Marketplace is supported by C3 Generative AI, verified traceable answers, secure, hallucination-free, LLM-agnostic, IP liability-free. Learn more at c3.ai. And by the Peter G. Peterson Foundation, a nonpartisan organization dedicated to raising awareness and accelerating action on America's fiscal challenges to build a brighter economic future for the next generation. Learn more at pgpf.org. And by Financially Inclined. Money can't buy you happiness, but it definitely can't hurt. Financially Inclined, a podcast from Marketplace, makes learning about money simple so you can make the most of your life. Listen to the new season wherever you get your podcasts.
Support for WNYC comes from Charles P. Rogers, New York bed makers for 7 generations at 17th Street, Manhattan and Route 17, New Jersey. Handcrafted mattresses and beds since 1855. More at charlesprogers.com.
On the next Brian Lehrer Show, who's leaving New York? A new study finds it's not who some politicians say it is. The city has more millionaires than before the pandemic. People who can't afford the rent are moving out. We'll look at more details and invite your stories. Also, the MTA thinks it has the final version of congestion pricing, but is inviting comments one last time. Details here. The Brian Lehrer Show, weekdays at 10 a.m. on WNYC.
You're listening to Marketplace on WNYC. Coming your way in the 7 o'clock hour of All Things Considered, our weekly segment on the way about transit news in our area. This week, congestion pricing is getting closer to becoming a reality. We're going to hear what some New Yorkers and New Jerseyans had to say about it at 7. Stay tuned.
This is Marketplace. I'm Kai Ryssdal. Let's talk credit ratings here for a minute, shall we? Countries have them. We've talked about how some of the big credit rating agencies are worried about political dysfunction in Washington and America's creditworthiness. Companies, of course, have them. They sell bonds, debt it's called sometimes, to raise money to grow or to invest. People have them in a way, too. They're called credit scores for us, but the basic idea is the same. If your credit score or rating goes down, it gets harder and mostly more expensive to borrow. You know who else has them, those scores and ratings? Institutions of higher learning, because they sell bonds too. Fitch Ratings is out with a report that says colleges and universities are facing some economic headwinds and is warning bond investors to keep an eye on things. Marketplace's Stephanie Hughes has that.
The problems colleges are dealing with in business terms are fewer customers, which is to say declining enrollment, and increased costs in the form of higher wages for faculty and staff.
And so there's a squeeze at both ends when it comes to year-to-year operations.
George Edward Stamola is one of the authors of that new report from Fitch. He notes there's also a limited appetite for colleges to raise their prices, aka tuition. And now, with interest rates rising, if a college does want to try to attract more students by building a fancy new gym or dorm,
the cost of capital for those borrowing efforts is increasing.
Another financial concern, dealing with old debts that are now coming due. After the 2008 recession, lots of colleges took out loans, not for residence halls or science labs, but for regular old maintenance, says Dominique Baker of Southern Methodist University.
Like make sure that a building is kept up to date, that its heating system is kept up to date, that we are making sure that asbestos is being taken care of, and all those sorts of things.
These financial challenges will be easier to handle for private colleges with large endowments. Catherine Hill of the education nonprofit Ithaca S&R says there's another factor at play.
It depends on who your students are. If your applicant pool is mostly middle income students and you need to give a lot of financial aid to make it possible for students to come, you're going to be in a tough position.
Hill points out that schools are already cutting costs by eliminating whole academic departments and laying off faculty. And Fitch predicts we'll continue to see more institutions merge or close. I'm Stephanie Hughes for Marketplace.
All right, here's one from the wait, really? category. The great financial crisis of 2008 was 15 years ago. 15 years ago. And of the many economic data points and milestones of that very unpleasant time, the one we're going to focus on today is youth unemployment, 16 to 24-year-olds, who back then had an unemployment rate of 18%. And the pressure to find work, part-time or otherwise, forced people to make some choices about how to spend their time. From our podcast, This is Uncomfortable, a story of two friends and a decision about saving money. Here's Marketplace's Rima Craze.
In 2009, Chris Badaker and Jake Darty were in their early 20s living outside Baltimore. They were best friends and bandmates, both barely getting by, working multiple part-time jobs. They bonded over their financial struggles.
I tried to write down everything I was earning and then everything that it was costing me to exist, basically. And I remember the number came out to negative 17.
That's tough.
I can remember scraping $7 worth of change off of my dresser and feeling like that was a lot.
Jake was saddled with credit card debt and Chris had student loans, and their rent was eating up most of their income. Then one day, a housing miracle. Someone they knew owned a big empty house and made them an offer. Do you want to live in this house rent-free with just one catch? Here's Jake.
And they said the deal is you'll have to clean it and you'll have to fix it up, but you can live there for free. And I said, we're in. We'll take it.
You didn't hesitate.
No, not at all.
Not having to pay rent would represent to me almost a 200% raise, if you think of it that way.
It was a no-brainer. That is, until they opened the front door.
This living room is filled with broken furniture, a life-size G.I. Joe, and a hot tub. Now, the hot tub does not work.
Inside the house?
In the house.
It was a cross between a hoarder house and a haunted house. And it felt like every room held its own horror. One bedroom was so packed with Beanie Babies, you could barely open the door. You could also hear mice in the walls. And if you needed to use the bathroom, well, good luck. There was just one toilet in the middle of an unfinished basement that was constantly flooded. When friends would come over, they'd tell Chris and Jake,
this place should be considered condemned, and you legally should not be allowed to live here.
And as the temperature dropped that first winter, they realized there was no heat. One January morning, it was 7 degrees outside and inside. Jake had reached his limit.
It hurt my feet tremendously to walk across the floor, and I said, Chris, I literally think this place is killing me.
Chris had things a little easier thanks to an electric blanket his dad gifted him. Chris knew he couldn't let his best friend suffer another night. So even though it seemed like a huge expense at the time, he went out and bought one for Jake.
I unfurled this heated blanket, and the joy of, oh my God, I'm not going to be so cold tonight. And also that quiet, Chris knew and cared for me. And that moment became the turning of the tides for us.
Up until that point, the house had been slowly pulling them apart. But now they felt inspired to rally together.
Now we are a team. We are going to survive this thing, and not only survive it,
we will not let go until we figure out how it is great.
They began to invite friends over who grew to love this bizarre, creepy house. They drank beers on the roof, listening to records, projected Mario Kart on the living room walls, started traditions where they ate lots of chili, and forged deeper bonds. And all the while, they did manage to save enough money to start paying off their debts. Chris remembers the day he sat down to make his last student loan payment.
This is what this chilly shivering with a bunch of mice has enabled, is that I don't have to have this lingering cloud over my head anymore. I can just click this little submit button and it will be like it never happened.
When they finally moved out after almost 2 years, Jake remembers taking one last look at the house.
And I remember a feeling of fresh air. I remember an exhale. And just to breathe out and say, oh, that thing is over.
Today, Chris and Jake live hundreds of miles apart, but they're still best friends. And whenever they catch up, conversation inevitably returns to the house. This harebrained scheme that led to epic memories and healthier bank accounts. I'm Marie Mejres for Marketplace.
There are, in case you didn't know, 2 data sets that go into the November unemployment report we're going to get tomorrow. The household survey, where the Labor Department goes and talks to actual people to ask them whether they've got a job or not, and if not, whether they're looking for one. And there's the establishment survey, where they call companies and ask them how many positions they have added or cut in that month. So, while we wait for official word, we figured we would do our own establishment survey with one of our retail regulars. Annie Lang Hartman is the owner of Wild Letty. That's a stationery and boutique shop in Leelanau County, Michigan.
So right now we are kind of holding steady. We have about 4 employees that we pull from to cover our 2 stores that we have. That's kind of going to stay the same through Christmas. And then after the new year, there's just not enough foot traffic to be open 7 days a week. So we're dropping down to 5, which means that, you know, our hours for our employees that are available, it's definitely going down. But pretty much everyone has said they wanted to come back and work for us next year when we really start getting going again. So it doesn't seem like we'll be having any job openings next year at all, which is kind of amazing. I've had 2 employees with me from the very beginning when I first hired my first employee in 2020. Everyone likes what they do. We like our customers. I try to make it a fun place to work and give everybody their independence and let them run with the skills that they have. A lot of the people that work for me are creative and they have time to work on their own creative things or their side hustles and that kind of thing. So I just try to make it a work experience that they want to come to and they feel supported. So I would like to think that's why that we have been able to hang on to our employees for so long and they want to come back and work for us.
Annie Lang Hartman there. She's the owner of Wild Letty up in Leelanau County, Michigan.
Marketplace is supported by the American Opportunity Index, a new ranking of how well companies invest in talent and advance employees' careers. More at AmericanOpportunityIndex.org.
This final note on the way out today, a quickie because we're running a little bit long. I mentioned gas prices in the numbers. Here's why. Oil, $69 and change a barrel. John Buckley, John Gordon, Rick Carr, Diantha Parker, Amanda Peacher, and Stephanie Seek are the Marketplace editing staff. Amir Babawe is the managing editor. I'm Kai Risdell. We will see you tomorrow, everybody. This is 8 p.m.